Portugal is a nation located on the Iberian Peninsula in southwestern Europe, bordering Spain. The islands of the Azores and Madeira remain with the Republic as autonomous regions, who have their own regional governments. The Portuguese Empire was one of the first colonial empires and lasted many centuries. So how powerful was the empire? The empire began in 1415 when John I of Portugal captured the city of Ceuta. Portugal at this time were not the wealthiest of nations, although they did have a strong navy. The exploration of the unknown world occurred mainly due to wealthy nobles who wanted new sources of wealth. They sponsored many explorers to charter the seas and find new lands for them to trade. One of the most famous explorers was Henry the Navigator. His voyages allowed the settlement of the Azores and Madeira. Henry wished to know how far the Muslim territories in Africa extended, and whether it was possible to reach Asia the sea in order to reach the source of the spice trade. However, the Ottomans and the Europeans didn't exactly get along. Henry continued on his voyage, and by 1455 most of West Africa had been explored. Exploration really kicked off when technology advanced. The new design of triangular sails made ships travel much faster and allowed Portugal to sail down to what is now Ghana. Portuguese explorers continued exploring further down the west coast of Africa until Bartholomew Diaz sailed around what is now South Africa. Soon Vasco da Gama continued this trend and sailed all the way around Africa and landed in India. As the Portuguese explored the coastlines of Africa, they left behind a series of padróis. These were stone crosses engraved with the Portuguese coat of arms which marked their claim. In 1492, Christopher Columbus landed in the Bahamas and eventually discovered the New World for Spain, which he believed to be Asia. Spain at this point had also begun exploration and was looking for ways to expand its empire. Thanks to a treaty, the world outside of Europe was divided between Spain and Portugal, although European powers would soon ignore this. And after much exploration, it was now time for Portugal to expand their empire. They established what can be called a trading post empire. At the time, Portugal didn't exactly have the largest population. With this lack of manpower, it was rather difficult to move inland and capture territory further away from the sea. With a strong navy, however, Portugal was able to easily hold coastal regions. To protect their colonies and trading posts, they built many feitories, which were essentially island forts and factories acting as trading ports and warehouses for military garrisons. Portuguese armadas were often sent into the Indian Ocean to trade, and Portuguese weaponry was far more advanced, which meant dominating an area was simple, and they could have great influence in the region. Many feitories were settled along the coast of the Indian Ocean, and Portugal eventually decided to bring in a system where sailors and traders could pay Portugal for a license. In return, they would get safety from pirates. This system was called the cartaz system, and this system made Portugal very rich. The Portuguese did begin to settle in Brazil in 1500. However, soon French explorers started smuggling Brazil wood back to Europe and tried settling on the coast. Portugal was understandably mad about this and decided to begin colonization. Portugal made many trading posts and colonies throughout the world. Most notably was Goa, a small colony in India, as well as Sri Lanka. They conquered Malacca, which was very important as it gave them domination over the spice trade. In 1542, Portugal met Japan and established a trading post, which will one day become Nagasaki. When King Sebastian died without an heir, conflict arose between Spain and Portugal. Spain gained control and Philip II formed the Iberian Union. With this union, it brought many enemies for Portugal, as Spain was at war with England, France, the Netherlands and everyone else who didn't like the Spanish. In this union, Portugal was mostly independent, except in areas where the military was concerned. They managed to defeat the Dutch, who were trying to take Brazil. However, many of Portugal's overseas colonies were captured by other European powers. The loss of colonies was one of the reasons that contributed to the end of the personal union with Spain. So in 1640, John VI was proclaimed King of Portugal, and the Portuguese Restoration War began. After Portugal had regained independence, gold was discovered in Brazil, with a large influx of migrants, which in turn made Portugal very wealthy. The Portuguese colony of Angola was founded, with 100 families of colonists and 400 soldiers. But Portuguese colonialism kicked off when other European powers began settling in Africa. They focused on expanding their outposts in Africa into nation-sized territories to compete with the other Europeans, mainly pressing into Angola and Mozambique. The empire reached its territorial height in 1821. The empire owned many colonies including present-day Brazil, East Timor, Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde and Equatorial Guinea. But Brazil declared independence in 1882, along with many other South American countries. But this did not mean the end of Portugal's empire. It was only after the devastation of World War II that nations felt the desire for independence. Portugal was one of the first empires ever to have existed, and is well and truly gone. Within its history blossoms tales of violence and greatness, but truly helped shape the world we live in today.